Hello and welcome everyone to another edition of our Leaders in Philanthropy interview series. We have experts, leaders, and everyday people who are changing the world in big and small ways through giving them of themselves, their time, love, energy, heart, money, and other resources. Each one of these individuals is living their lives in alignment with what I like to call the generosity principle, and that is why they're here to share with us some ideas and actions to make the world a better place. Here at Will Carlos Training, we work with you to make your fundraising fun, easy, and compelling, and to make sure that you get the results that you want. So today is a very exciting day. I have with me Yvan Baker, our current Liberal MP for Etobicoke riding in Toronto, and he has a great bio up on the website. And usually with bios, I like to skim through and just pick out the highlights, but he's actually got two solid paragraphs here, so I want everyone to listen up because it's actually all really good stuff and relates very much to our conversation today about philanthropy. So, Yvan Baker is a business advisor, teacher, and community leader. Yvan most recently operated his own business, working as a management consultant to help Canadian companies grow and solve their strategic challenges. Previously, Yvan was a consultant with the Boston Consulting Company in Toronto and New York. He has consulted to clients that include Fortune 500 companies in a variety of sectors. Yvan has consulted in industries such as retail, energy, financial services, and telecommunications. So at this point, people might be thinking, what does this have to do with philanthropy? But just listen in. Yvan also teaches a Master of Business Administration at York University, and for years has worked to foster opportunity for those less fortunate and to build stronger, more prosperous communities. He has volunteered for a variety of charitable and humanitarian organizations, including Leave Out Violence as a board director, the Emerging Leaders Network, where he worked with civic leaders on projects promoting Toronto's economic and social prosperity, and Global Grassroots, where he supported emerging women leaders in Rwanda on projects that address issues such as lack of access to water, domestic violence, and health education. He's also served our constituency as an executive assistant to former MP of Etobicoke Centre, and now is the current leader of that riding. So, Yvan, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be here. Thanks for being here.
Will, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, it's great. And like I say, usually those bios are filled with extra stuff, but yours is just solid. It gives us a really good idea of who you are and what you do for the world. So I'd love to just jump right in, and you can tell us in your own words, your journey. And I leave this question really open for everyone. Your journey with generosity, your journey with philanthropy, your journey to where you are today in that regards.
Sure. Well, thanks so much, Will. And I think that my journey starts, I think for so many of your guests, I would imagine, but certainly for me, it started as a young person and being influenced by people who were close to me and around me. And in my case, that was my parents, but even more importantly, by my grandparents on my mom's side. In particular, they were immigrants to Canada, and as so many immigrants do and did, face the challenges of coming to Canada and building a life for themselves and their family, but came from great hardship as well. And so they had a great appreciation for how wonderful Canada was. My grandfather used to say over and over that Canada is the best country in the world, and really cemented that in my mind. But the journey really began with that realization and the fact that my grandfather and grandmother both used to talk a lot about how Canada is great because people before us made it great, because they worked hard to make it great. And he always reaffirmed or reminded me that it's my responsibility to continue to work to make it even better in the years to come. And I think that value, that principle, is something that was strongly held both by my grandparents, but also by my parents. And so as a result, being involved in some sort of community work throughout my life was something that really came as it became fundamental to who I am and helped me to fulfill that commitment that my grandfather wanted me to fulfill. So I think that's where the journey started. And of course, you talked through my bio a little bit, so you've given the listeners a chance to kind of get a sense of the kind of work that I've done. Happy to talk about that a little bit more, but that's really where the journey started. And of course, having some strong support and mentorship from my parents and from other family members and from work colleagues along the way that helped me along that journey to make sure that I continue to be involved in interesting and meaningful ways.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so I want to get into a bit of I want to get into a lot of actually the work that you've done overseas because that's very much in line with our listeners and what we're all looking for. But first, before that, I wanted to actually set the context for everybody listening that you're very different from most of the people that we have had so far on this series, and on purpose. I actually thought of you on purpose because I sat down to think of, philanthropy and generosity doesn't just exist in the world of people that volunteer or people that fundraise or people that donate from a business. It it is part of the fabric of everybody's life. And one of those areas that's actually key is in politics. And that's why I thought of you, because I thought, who do I know best in politics? Who, and also who has demonstrated the most generosity that I know in politics? And you popped to mind instantly because we only met in person once, I believe. But you, like, just right off the bat, you heard what I was up to with fundraising and all that work, and just, I think you dropped two or three names that night and gave me an email and a phone number and your phone number, and you were just so generous that that's why you popped to mind instantly. So I wanted to let everyone know that really is the backdrop of this conversation. So I'd love to hear, in politics, so where you are now today, how do you see that as like the end result, or kind of the apex of where you've come to so far in your journey?
Yeah, no, well, thank you very much, Will, and thank you very much for the kind words. I mean, I think as someone who has had a chance to do a lot of volunteer work over the years, I've worked with people who, like yourself, who are giving of their time, who care about their community, who care about issues, who want to make their community a better place. And so I think when we met, I immediately was excited by your passion and your enthusiasm, and I think that's contagious. So.
Hmm.
In terms of the to answer your question, I think, to me, one of the things that I realized, and you mentioned in talking about my bio, about some of the work that I've done both abroad and locally here in Toronto and Etobicoke, with a range of causes. And I think no matter if in each of those cases when I worked with on issues that were important, so whether it be in Rwanda, working with women who were trying to alleviate poverty, who were trying to reduce abuse in their particular families or communities. We're trying to get access to clean drinking water, address the spread of HIV/AIDS, or even here domestically, working with young people who are victims of violence, as an example, or working with a group of folks I worked with a group of folks at the Emerging Leaders Network, which is part of a project under Civic Action, to think about how we can work with community, political, business leaders to figure out how we can grow Toronto's economy. So I've worked on a range of projects and a range of issues, and if there's a number of common themes among those issues, but one of the common themes that stood out for me always was the fact that government had an important role to play on all those issues. And sometimes I thought government was doing, a reasonably good job of contributing or trying to address the issue at hand. And sometimes I thought to myself, government could do a lot better, that I could do a lot better if I was in government. And so that's really the motivation behind being in politics and running for public office. And so in terms of the culmination of the journey, I don't know if this is a culmination of the journey or just an important step on the journey. But I will say that being in elected politics for the last 6 months or so, and being a member of the provincial government here in Ontario gives me a chance to have a meaningful impact on a lot of the issues that I've worked on in the past as a volunteer, and on others that I haven't had as much exposure to.
Mm.
But really for the betterment of our quality of life, betterment of our province and country. And so I think it provides me with an opportunity to have a great amount of impact. And sometimes that impact is I'll call it on issues that touch all of us or most of us. So an example could be alleviating child poverty or homelessness, or improving our education system or something like that. But it's also, today I'm talking to you from my constituency office here in Etobicoke Centre, and I've just met with 3 people this morning, 3 or 4, who brought a range of issues to that they're concerned about or think that the government could work on, and sometimes we're able to, and sometimes there are very specific cases that impact the individual, and having an opportunity when you can to help an individual with a specific case is also incredibly rewarding too. So that's a description of the journey, a little bit of how I got here and why I think it's an important part of the journey. But we'll see where the rest of the journey takes me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you're speaking to a lot of my core values, and probably a lot of people on this call as well, that it's that idea of personal responsibility. And the way that I have realized it in my life is that I used to look at big world issues and big things that were happening in the world, and I would always think, I didn't realize it, but I would always think like, oh, someone's taking care of that,
Yeah.
like someone's on that. And then I thought of a literal example the other day when the tsunami happened about 10 years ago or 9 years ago. That so affected the Asia and Thailand and places like that. I had a friend who actually was close by in the world, and she went down to volunteer. And I literally thought, oh, I'll give her $10, and that's and she'll take care of it. Like she'll take care of my part in helping. Like that, not she as one individual can solve the whole problem, but that she's there on my behalf, which is true. And $10 is better than no dollars if it's given to the right people and right in the right system. But I love that your excuse me, your realization of that you're responsible basically, but that led you into politics because for most of us, not all of us, but most of us in the world, I think of nonprofit and social change and social justice. I think there's a bit of a resignation. I mean, I know there is for myself in the world of politics that I would prefer to do it in the world of business or nonprofit or fundraising. But I love that you are willing to step into the arena of politics because so many people have lost faith, frankly, in politics. So I love that you're like, no, that's how I'm going to make a difference here right now. And I think our listeners could really take something from that. So what's been your experience in the world of politics, bringing that responsibility to politics?
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's a great question, and I think if you ask me, a year from now or a couple of years from now, my answer may evolve a little bit as I develop more experience in politics. But certainly, the experience that I have so far has been has been really rewarding, I would say, to begin with. I mean, really, again, going back to the point I made earlier, that it really gives you an opportunity to be at the table with the decision makers or have access to the decision makers, and on a day-to-day basis, basically, on so many issues that touch us very directly. And the provincial government, I would argue, impacts our day-to-day life more than any other level of government, because it holds it's responsible for a number of the issues that touch us so much. Regularly, but the experience has been one where that's been interesting. I think on a number of levels. One is no matter what party folks are elected from, political party, they all, when you have conversations with them, at the end of the day, they're all there because they want to make a difference, right? They want to have a positive impact. We all realize we're there for a finite period of time, and everybody wants to make an important contribution. So I think that's the one experience that I've had, and knowing that we're all we may not all agree on how we want to get to that better Ontario or better Canada, but we know that we agree that we all do desperately want to, and so I think that unity of purpose, I think, means that you can find opportunities for compromise and for agreement on some of the things that really, really matter to people, and that's how you find solutions to challenges. That's one thing. The second thing I would say is that is that the issues that face us day to day, sometimes when, as an observer of government in the past, I've thought, well, there's a relatively simple solution to this, and I think, why doesn't the government simply do this or simply do that? And then when you get involved in the government, you realize, wow, that these issues are you appreciate the complexity of the issues, but you also appreciate that sometimes actions taken by government can have unintended consequences, and that's one of the challenges I think of being in government is, when you pass a new piece of legislation or change a regulation or whatever the case may be, in the hopes of improving the quality of life of folks or addressing an issue, there are resulting unintended consequences sometimes that government has to be mindful of. And I think being in government has humbled me in my because it makes me realize that there are so many people that we are accountable of 13.5 million people here in Ontario. I'm accountable to about 115,000 people on Etobicoke Centre who are very diverse, who have a range of views, a range of perspectives on issues, and need to make sure I take all of that into account in trying to address some of the issues whereas in the past, I think in the private sector or in a particular charity, there's been there's been a unity of purpose of all the people involved, and we've been able to act with a little bit more haste and because we haven't had that same level of accountability to such a broad range of people. So that's been the other eye opener, and certainly not something I didn't know before, but something that I appreciate maybe more than I did before.
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
are some of the experiences. I don't know if that answers your question, Will, but
No, it does, yeah. And I kind of something that came out of that leads in perfectly with another point that I really wanted to cover with you because of your background in business. But there was something you mentioned there about getting to the decision makers,
yeah,
and I had this feeling like there's going to be people listening to this call who really need to hear that because a lot of us in uh, nonprofit world, charity world, even startups like business startups that are in the social sector, like my business in teaching people how to fundraise, is not technically nonprofit, but it's working with people in nonprofits, so it's lumped in that same category. But we tend to avoid, I think subconsciously, we tend to avoid going after decision makers, like the people that would actually have the whole fundraiser move forward, or the whole business, or the whole project, because well, I could speculate on the reasons, but we're just taking ineffective or inefficient actions. So we're talking with people that about donating $2 or $5 or $10, or we feel like we're out there fundraising with our hands out, begging for if you could just whatever you could give me, maybe $5 would be great, that'd be awesome. Whereas some other fundraisers go to decision makers and they say, look, you, Mr. CEO, you, Mr. President, you, Mr. Whoever, are going to donate 1% of annual profits. And for this company, that looks like $100,000. And that's like a one conversation thing. Now,
yeah,
every fundraiser is totally different. And I'm not saying that your local bake sale wants to go to a big, high powered CEO. But I just thought that was a great thing to explore, this idea of going for the decision makers. And what has been your experience with that and how it moves things forward, either in politics or in charity or in the business sector that you've worked in?
yeah. That's a great question, and I think it's interesting. In the case of politics, I've been elected to be that representative for the people of Etobicoke Center with those decision makers. That's my
Mm-hmm.
job, and I have the mandate. I have the mandate of the people of Etobicoke Center, and therefore can really exercise that responsibility effectively. Um, in the case of the fundraising example that you raise, you're right. Yes, if you can go to somebody who has access to those financial resources and can commit a significant amount of funding, um, then that's right. Then you can be very sort of efficient in your fundraising efforts. At the same time, those folks who have access to those resources, um, they, depending on their position and where those resources are coming from, um, a lot of times sometimes they're driven by personal interest or personal perspective or opinions on where those funds should go. Sometimes they're driven by they represent shareholders, they represent a charity, and therefore or some other organization, and therefore have their own stakeholders that they have to address. But a lot of that access, I think, in my experience in fundraising, is built on relationships,
Yeah.
and that's a little bit different in that you can't you can't force that. That's something that has to be built over time. And you're absolutely right. I mean, from a fundraising perspective, there's a tremendous amount of value to having that access, and therefore to building those relationships. The challenge is, of course, that those causes that receive that funding, those people that can build those relationships are often people who have built those relationships through business. And so that's been my experience in business. And so one of the powerful things I think we can do to address some of the things that you've been working on, Will, and the fundraising causes that we all care about, is to make sure that people who are in business are interested or engaged in some of the causes that we think are important. And it doesn't have to be the fundraisers themselves. It doesn't have to be the people who have the dollars, but it can be people who can then access the people who have the dollars
Mm-hmm.
to give. I think that's important. When I think about some of my private sector experience, a lot of the folks who I worked with were very engaged in the community, but some of them weren't. Right?
Mm-hmm.
They were busy with their own lives. They had families. I mean, hardworking, brilliant people. And on occasion, I have a conversation with one of them about some of the things I was working on, and they say, "Boy, I'd really like to get engaged with that. How can I get involved? Can I help?" And so I think, broadly speaking, and what I realized at that point was that there are opportunities for the charitable sector, the not-for-profit sector, to reach out to people who are in business, even if they're not the most senior people, but more broadly, because people in business also care. They just sometimes don't get invited to participate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, and I think that around the idea of decision makers is also the idea of having key leaders. So not doing it on your own, and that's something else that people could take from what you're saying is it's not just about the fundraising; it's also about the team that you build around the fundraising.
That's right.
Yeah. So I wanted to bring this into a couple and get into some how-tos or some like real applicable things that people listening to this call could really take away and apply to either their own fundraisers or their own businesses in the nonprofit sector. Uh, and I know that you've got a great background in business, so I thought I'd ask you first, what do you feel that you do better? Well, maybe not better than everybody else, but what are your like key or core skills that you think we could touch on a little bit?
Sure. That I bring to government to my current role?
Current role or from business as well, because I'm gonna kind of bring it around and bring it into fundraising and how I can pick your brain about because I see business and politics relating very much to fundraising, but I wanted to ask you first kind of which skills from the business sector or from your political life we can touch on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think so. My background, as you mentioned at the outset, is in management consulting. And for those of your listeners who aren't familiar with that field, management consultants are basically people who get hired by businesses to solve problems or challenges that the business itself doesn't know how to solve. Right? Usually strategic challenges. Things like, how do I grow my business? How do I should I invest in China? Should I buy this manufacturing facility? Should we expand a given division or operation? The questions like that the businesses face every day.
Mm-hmm.
And so my background is in finance. It's in strategy. And so that's a very high level description of what my skill set is through management consulting. But what I think I bring is I bring to government what I've brought to the charities that I've worked with is that strategic mind, that ability to help the organization determine help them think through what their objectives are,
Mm-hmm.
what success looks like, and then how do you get there? Right? What's the most effective path and efficient path to getting there? And helping them to lay out a strategy for themselves so that they can be effective. So when I think about government, that's helped me tremendously because the government is really is the largest. The government of Ontario is the largest organization in Ontario.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You can think it's not a business, not a for-profit business, but it is an organization
Mm-hmm.
that has similar challenges and opportunities to any other organization, profit or not for profit. When it comes to fundraising, which is I know the issue you're particularly interested in, I think every organization when it's fundraising needs to approach it with a strategy in mind. What's our objective from a dollars perspective? Who are the people that are going to be most likely to be interested in supporting this? How can we get people who are not interested currently interested and supportive? And what's the most efficient mechanisms, fundraising events, appeals, etc., to raise the funds that we're looking to raise? So answering those kinds of questions, the kinds of things that I've helped some organizations do, and we often think about fundraising as when we think about people who are good at fundraising, we think about the people who are there face to face with that business person who are out there selling the tickets for the fundraising dinner or whatever the case
Yeah.
may be.
Yeah.
And those people are critical. Those are the arms and legs of any fundraising strategy, of course. But there's also having a good plan is critical because that allows you. That ensures that you bring on the people that you need, right?
Mm-hmm.
You bring on the arms and legs, and the people who are going to execute that, the right kind of people. And at the end of the day, like any charity or any not-for-profit cause, it has to be something that people find enjoyable or rewarding and fun. And so having a plan as to how you're going to fundraise, but still make it relevant to the people who you're asking to work on it is important to make sure it remains that way, and those people stay engaged and do the best they can for your cause, whatever that cause may be.
Yeah.
So those are some of the skills that I bring and how it's applied to fundraising in the past.
Mm-hmm. Great. So then my nuts and bolts question, and I also love that you said enjoyable, rewarding, and fun, because that's very similar to my motto for fundraising is that fundraising should be fun, it should be easy, and it should work. Like if there's no point in if it's not fun then there's really no point in doing it. If it's not easy, then you're kind of doing it the wrong way. And I don't say easy like you're not nervous, because everyone's nervous when they go to fundraise. And also, it should be it should work. You should never do a fundraiser that doesn't work. You can't put in all that time and energy and effort and not have a great result come out the other end. So I wanted to get into some nuts and bolts. So let's just pick an example. We'll take so for the people listening, they're going to be probably doing fundraiser for around between $1,000 to $4,000, usually around $4,000. They want to do it through we'll pick Actually, why don't we pick one that I'm working on next, if that's okay? We can just take like a
Yeah,
real life example.
sure. Yeah.
So I'm doing one in the world of music. So it's going to be it'll be called, and this is just in the very beginning planning stages. So this is perfect because a lot of people listening are going to be like, I have this idea, but I have nothing else. So this is perfect because I'm in that same place. The music fundraiser it's called For All That You've Given Me, and the idea is that music has given me more in my life than I could ever possibly repay. And there are some songs that have been with me since I was a teenager that have, at times saved my life, at times saved my friendships or my marriage. The music has been there for me in a way that almost nothing else has. So that's why it's called For All You've Given Me. And the idea is to have different artists that I know and then branch out from there to record cover songs of the songs that for them have saved them at some point in their life. And then as we do that, we will raise money for a local charity in Toronto probably that works with kids in music, either provides instruments at a school or does free music classes or something in the world of music to continue to kind of give back to music what it's given to me.
That's great.
Um,
That's great.
yeah, and it's just the beginning of the idea, but we'll say it'll be $4,000, and it's so yeah, take it from there. So what would be the first step if you were going to give me advice on how to create that plan? Because you said you look at your objectives, then you look at who's interested, then you look at the most efficient path. So where would you start with that?
Yeah, yeah. So if you're trying to raise, so this is $4,000 you're trying to raise. The I think there's a number of questions we need to ask, and we'd have to have a more extensive conversation.
Yeah, yeah,
But we'll do a skinny version of it, if you will.
yeah.
One of the things that I think is going to be important is figuring out who you're serving. So if you're going to who these funds are going to serve.
Mm.
The folks who are going to be most interested, typically in giving, are folks who are going to be touched by the benefit that you're offering, right, through your fund. So you're going to raise a bunch of money, you're going to give it to various causes, schools, whatever the case may be, and then kids are going to have access to music. Right? So who's going to benefit from those kids having access to that music? Well, certainly the kids,
Mm-hmm.
but maybe their families. Maybe depending on who they're playing music for, maybe they'll be playing music for seniors. Right? Are there seniors in the community who might benefit from this? So identifying some I'll call them stakeholders, people who will be able to touch and feel the benefits of this, or people who have in the past touched and felt the benefits of this, right? Who can relate to the cause, I think is critical, because those are the folks who are going to be most likely to give, right? You'll find a handful of folks who won't be touched by this and never been touched by this who might give, but I would start there, identifying, making a list of who those people are, or those groups of people are, right? And I would then think about how I can appeal, how you can cater this fundraising initiative, to those people, right? So that it's relevant to them.
This is this is
What you
so
might do
great.
for the seniors might be different than what you might do for the parents of the children, or the relatives of the children, or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, and sorry to interrupt you there. I was just going to say this is so great because I just had a guy who really wants to do the program that's currently happening, the Fulfill Your Philanthropic Goal program. And he really wanted to do the program, but he felt that he's shy and he doesn't know enough people. And that was his concern about doing this program. And he's deciding right now if it's a good fit for him. And I love what you're saying because I could have just arrived in Toronto. I could know zero people, and I could come up with this music fundraising idea and have it be $4,000. And through the process that you're describing, figuring out who are the stakeholders, I don't have to know anybody. I can go to the music school. Now that I think about it, there's a music school on my street in Roncesvalles. I might go to them and say, hey, I'm thinking of doing this thing. Are there any parents that you think would love to get on board? And then even from there, we could build a team and then maybe go to the senior center that's also, or it's not a senior center, but there's one close by, and say, hey, look, thinking of doing this thing. Do you want to maybe get some people on board? So it's great because I don't have to know anybody. I don't have to have a huge social circle. I'm actually going to the people that care the most about this project. So that's great. So first we identify stakeholders, basically.
Yeah, yeah.
It's number one.
And when stakeholders is a more fancy term for it.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe another way of thinking about it is who cares, right? Maybe that's another way of thinking about this. Who cares about this cause? Who cares about this issue, right? People who that goes back to when I think about who cares, that helps me focus my energies around. It helps me identify who those stakeholders are, and then it helps me to then determine, as you said, how can we cater the benefit of this service to those folks, or how can we cater our fundraising event to those folks. So that's one piece. Then the next piece to me then would be to think about, are there groups of folks who are already working on this cause in some way? So you talked about music. Well, I mean, there's a tremendous number of organizations that that work to support music in a number of ways in our communities and society, right? So everyone from the Toronto Symphony Orchestra, down to the local music teacher in the local school, right? And there's and everything in between. And so, those folks, I would add that to the list of stakeholders that, who care, right? They're not folks who necessarily would benefit from what you're going to do, but they're folks who are passionate about the cause. And so again, add that to the list of stakeholders and think about, so once you've identified those, then it's thinking about, okay, how can we best access those, how can we best, access those folks, and then what can we, as part of our fundraising initiative, do to attract them to support it. And you talked earlier about this idea of, well, if you have access to a philanthropist or somebody who has access to a tremendous amount of funds, you can make a big impact in a short period of time. Well, I would start by the next thing I would do after having thought about who cares, who the stakeholders are, is I'd prioritize that list of stakeholders, right? Who are the folks who have the capacity to give the most, or to be the most generous for whatever reason, right? And can we do something to engage them? Because what you would do to, for example, raise funds from a philanthropist might be very different than what you would do to if you were trying to raise money from the local community. And that's not to say one's better than the other, but think, if you're working on volunteer hours, so you want to raise as much money for the cause as possible in the shortest period of time. Who are the people who are most likely to be willing to do that? So I would prioritize the people, and then think about what are the initiatives we can organize to those folks that are at least initially prioritized. I would also think about then, are there different audiences within that stakeholder group that we can appeal to? So there might be something you do to appeal to the philanthropist that may be different than you appeal to the local parents in the community whose kids are going to benefit from this music program potentially, right? And so you might do a bake sale with the parents. You might do a formal black tie event for some of the key philanthropists.
Right. Yeah.
Something to be thought through. But I think segmenting your audience, segmenting the stakeholders is important too. And then once you identified what those segments are, and you identified a number of ways of appealing to them, then I think it's really thinking about, okay, who are the people who I need to bring onto our team? We need to bring onto our team. We're going to be able to execute each of these projects, right? So somebody who's going to organize a black tie event may have very different experience and interests than someone who's organizing a bake sale. Yeah, it might be the same person. And if you can find that person, boy, oh boy, let me know, because I'd love to borrow their time as well. But usually it's different people with different interests. And so identifying who the people are you should bring onto your team as a result to deliver against that is probably the next step. So those are some of the key steps. And then obviously supporting that person and giving them the resources in the form of volunteers or finances or whatever the case may be to execute that is the next step. So those are at a high level. Those are the key steps. Identify who cares, the stakeholders, prioritize them. Segment them so that you build different groups within that list, and then identify how you're gonna approach each of them, and what the message is to them, what the value proposition, in other words, what you're offering that segment, and how the fundraising event should be built as a result, and then bring people onto the team to help you do that.
Yeah. There's so much really great stuff there, and I'm just I'm jotting down notes really quick. So there's a lot of ideas that come. But what I'd love for people to take from this is this brilliant intersection of business and philanthropy, and that's really been kind of one of my little agendas that I never planned for, but it always comes up during these interviews. And it was in a great TED Talk. It was called, I don't remember the lady who did the TED Talk, but it was something about what charity sector can learn from Coca-Cola. And it was a really great talk, and it was about the entrepreneurial experience that Coke was bringing to parts of Canada, parts of Africa, and other parts of the world, where they were helping people to create an income And because of that, they had this seamless ability to infiltrate parts of the African continent that Pepsi could not reach, because Pepsi had centralized distribution. Now, there's pluses and minuses to both, and I'm not going to get into that. But what I want to say is, you're really coming at this as a strategist, which is obviously your background, like you said. And I'd really encourage people that are listening to this call to take it that way, because it could easily go into the world of, well, everyone should care about my thing, or everyone should care about this orphanage in Thailand. Everyone should care about taking better care of our seniors here at home. It can go that way because we're all idealists and we want to change the world. And I would invite everybody to think that change happens first at small and then at big. And it takes time to get to the place of, for example, Martin Luther King, who had in a way, a very general message. But if you look back and you read all the talks that he did to get to that, I have a dream message, which was about equality and bigger issues. All the talks on the way there dealt with smaller, day-to-day individual audiences, individual stakeholders, like you're talking about, that built up to that big message where they could all come together at the end. So I don't want anyone listening to think, oh, this doesn't apply to me. If you're fundraising or you want to fundraise, this totally applies to you very much right now. And the steps that you've outlined are really solid as a place for people to get started.
No, I appreciate it. I appreciate you and I don't have as much time, and your listeners don't. We could obviously come up with some examples to illustrate it, but it is a little ambiguous. But if you can identify who cares, if you can prioritize the people, that list of people by maybe who cares the most, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who has the most to give? If you can organize them, or what I call bucket, or divide them into segments, that based on their interests and why they care, and then you can customize fundraising events that appeal to all of them, and that's how I think about it, and I hope that's helpful to your listeners. But from just past experience and seeing how some of the most effective fundraisers work, the most effective people in fundraising, they're not necessarily the best salespeople, the most aggressive. Yes, there has to be that level of outgoingness and willingness to take risk, but they're really just really thoughtful about how they about that plan that they put together, and then everything sort of takes care of itself from there. So.
Yeah, thoughtful planners.
Yeah,
that's great, and it shows when people, it shows on the other end. So when someone makes a fundraising request of me, I can feel and I can hear and I can see if there's been a thoughtful plan or if they are just kind of going for it. And both are great, but the thoughtful planning feels way better when you're the person being asked. And when you were saying about that it's a very general plan, I don't see this strategic plan that you've outlined. I mean, it's a brief, but I don't think it's general. And I'll throw one example just to clarify for people, and you can tell me if I'm on the right track, just so we can give a real solid example. So stop me at any point if I kind of veer off from what you're suggesting. So we've got the music fundraiser going to raise $4,000, called For All That You've Given Me. And some of the stakeholders would be people like musicians, people like any schools of music around Toronto, because I'm in Toronto. It could be seniors that have musicians or students that come and play in seniors' homes. And it could be the students themselves or their parents that really have seen the benefit in having kids have access to music. So, for example, a band at a local high school, it could be the parents of the band members, who have seen the difference that it's made for them to get to be a part of the band and have that creative expression or creative outlet. So that could be some of the people that care, or different stakeholders. So one message that would relate to, we'll pick one of those, so say seniors, would be a message around, we've all been given so much in our life, and music has given me, me personally, Will, or whoever on the team is doing it, music has given me more than I could ever repay. And I'd love to invite you to be part of this project. We're raising $4,000 for, and then insert the name of the nonprofit that I decided to fundraise for. And we would love for your support in that, because I know that you've been given so much in this world, and there's still so much more that you could be a part of if you choose to. So we'd love to have your support. How do you think that could go? And that would be the message for seniors. Then there'd be different ones for different people, different organization, or different buckets or stakeholders. And then and then I can bring on team members that have connections in schools, or I could bring on team members that have connections in the seniors' home, or with students, or with musicians. So if I wasn't a musician, although I am, I could bring on a team member who is a musician and already goes to coffee houses and already goes to those places to actually interact with musicians on that level. Is that a decent example?
That's a great example, and if I can add to that, just an idea that may work in some cases, and maybe I'll give an example. If you think about some fundraising causes that a lot of us are exposed to, the ones that have been tremendously successful, and some of the things I think are this tremendous amount of fundraising that's being done to raise money for breast cancer research, for example, or the work that's been done around prostate cancer. The Movember fundraising initiative, for example. And one of the things you can take away from that is the vast majority of folks who are approached to donate to these causes are not survivor or have not experienced breast cancer directly or prostate cancer directly, right? But so many of us give to those causes, and when you ask why, I think there's a number of reasons, but I think they're obviously important causes, terrible diseases, but one of the reasons that I think those causes have been so successful is because they rely on people to then reach out to other people. And so, right, because I don't know if you've experienced this, Will, directly, but I've certainly been approached by friends of mine who've been touched by breast cancer or by prostate cancer in some way. Maybe they've suffered from it. Maybe they know somebody who suffered from it. Right? So they're passionate about it. And they'll reach out to me and they'll tell me their story as you just described your story around music. And they're a friend. And if a friend wants my help with a cause and it's important to my friend, then it's probably important to me. Right? And so when you think about, to your point around the music issue, not everybody's going to care about, you'll identify that list of stakeholders and who cares. But there's probably a bunch of people out there who you wouldn't identify in your list of people who are particularly passionate about the cause, but might be willing to support the cause if someone who does care approached them. And so as you think about that list of those people that you bring on the team to help raise money, yes, you can raise money from those folks who are on your stakeholder list, but sometimes the stakeholder list can then become part of your fundraising network and team. Because they can then reach out. They're passionate about the cause. They can reach out and reach people who you and I can't reach because we don't have a relationship with them, but they do. And I think that's the power of really some of the most successful fundraising, whether it be a fundraising dinner or fundraising events like the ones the fundraising causes that I just described, are effective because fundraising is so much about relationships. And any fundraising event starts with a small number of people who are passionate, like you're passionate about this about the cause of music. Well, but you will engage some of those key stakeholders, the people who care, and then those people can then engage others. And I think that's when you do that, that's when you really kind of optimize or maximize, I think, the potential, the fundraising potential for a particular event. So that's just a suggestion to tack onto what you said.
That's great. That's a great addition, and it actually leads into the next and kind of probably the last point to really cover, which is a question for you around, because what I hear with what you just shared about people that are, so you, for example, if you're affected by prostate cancer personally, and then you ask me as a friend, I mean, I call that leadership. I call that passing along the inspiration, passing along the leadership mantle that the organizer of Movember has now inspired you to go out and do one of the scariest things in the world, which is ask another human being for something. Because in my work in fundraising, I found that it's one of the scariest things. It's right up there with public speaking, is this like going to ask another human being for something in person or on the phone. It's one of the scariest things in the world. But I hear that as leadership. So I wanted to know from you, in your leadership role currently, so in politics, how do you see that? How do you see that moving forward into the future for your riding and the leadership that you can cause with that same kind of inspiration?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, Will. Really good question. Let me just, if I may, quickly comment on the point about how it can be scary to ask people. One of the things I found through political campaigning is that you have to ask people for money if you want to run a campaign.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I had to do a lot of fundraising on my own. One of the things that I realized was when you reach out, the people who are most likely to support your cause, like we talked about, are people who have a relationship with you, a lot of them. Some of them are passionate about the cause, but most of them are driven by a relationship with you. And you don't want to damage that relationship when you make that ask. And so one of the things, the rules that I have for myself when I fundraise, and hopefully helpful to you or some of your listeners, is always make it easy for the person to say no, right?
Mm-hmm.
Make it comfortable for the person to say. Not make it easy, but make it comfortable. So, because if it's not comfortable for the person to say no, then you're potentially risking damaging the relationship with that person, which you don't want to do, right? As much as you care about the cause of music, you don't want that $100 check that you receive from the person to cost your relationship with that person, right? And so finding a way to make it comfortable for them to say no alleviates that risk. Most people will give anyway, because if you present a strong story and a strong rationale, and even if they say no, they'll respect you for asking.
Mm-hmm.
That's the other thing to keep in mind. So for those of your listeners who think about, well, I don't want to make that ask, I'm nervous about it, what if they say no? Well, even those folks who say no, they'll respect you for asking, because you're showing leadership, which is what you just talked about, right? Your point around leadership, well,
Yeah.
that's exactly what you're doing. So I took us off stride a little bit, but I wanted to just comment on that because that's something I experienced recently. But in terms of my leadership in politics, there's so many issues that I'm passionate about that the people of the community here in Etobicoke Centre have raised with me that are important. And I think one of my roles is absolutely what you just talked about. It's rallying support for those causes. As a legislator, I have a certain amount of influence on those particular issues, whether they be, and some of those issues are things like access to care, health care for seniors. It could be quality of education for our young people. It could be youth unemployment. It could be, a range of other topics. Certainly through, as a legislator, one of 107 in Ontario, I have an impact on that directly in that way. And I have impact because I have access to those decision makers, as we talked about earlier, the ministers and the premier, who are really influential on those particular topics.
Mm-hmm.
But I also, in the community, to your point around leadership, I have an opportunity to bring people together to solicit ideas, to solicit solutions, to get help, frankly, in working on some of these topics. Sometimes government can only do so much to solve a particular topic. Sometimes we need more than just government to act, right? And so my role in part is to consult, to learn, so we bring the best possible solutions to government, particularly from the perspective of this community, but also make sure that we're building teams and encouraging folks who are addressing some of those problems in the community without the help of government or independently of government. And so that's what I see my job is, to make sure that I make the lives of people in Etobicoke Centre better. That's 4 years from now, success to me is that.
Yeah.
And so identifying the issues that are important to people of Etobicoke Centre, and making sure that government, but also the community, is doing everything it can to shepherd resources, to shepherd ideas towards those issues is another part of my role, and that's how I really see leadership in my role as MPP.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yvan, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. We went a couple minutes over, but we really appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to do this. And if anyone, we have different people on here. So we've got some business people that have a resource they want to point people to, some people that don't, and they just love to share their journey with generosity. Is there, can people go to a website for you if they want to find out more information about your life in politics, the work that you do, or if they happen to live in Etobicoke Centre and they want to get in touch with you with any concerns or any things that they want to bring to you? Is there a way that they can get in touch with you?
Absolutely, and I'd welcome that if anybody wants to get in touch. I'd really enjoy that and appreciate it. I'll give you the website first, if I can. www.yvanbaker.onmpp.ca, and that's the website. The Yvan Baker is spelled YVANBAKER.onmpp.ca. The email address that we have here is the letter Y, then Baker, Baker, dot on. Sorry, let me take that back. Well, I got it wrong there. ybaker.mpp.co@liberal.ola.org. That's the email, but all of that's available on the website. So if you go to the website, you can access that contact information and get in touch with me. We have a phone number here, 416-234-2800. You can reach me there as well. So happy to chat with with you, Will, of course, at any time, but also anybody else who's listened to this and who's interested in talking about the issues or about fundraising or anything else.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yvan, thank you so much. Thank you for your generosity, and I'm just going to click in on the recording. And thank you, everybody, so much for your time and listening to this great talk. Hope you got a lot of value.